the lower level.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting, sort of aside, because I worked in corporate America for many years before. I've been in my business for 20 years, but prior to that I worked in corporate America and in, you have to be entrepreneurial even if you're in the corporate arena, right? You have to sort of really be an entrepreneur inside of that game. Right. So I've helped people do that too, right? How to really position themselves, how to really find their groove in that space.
Yeah, and I would agree with you because, We Entertainment, the company that I founded and worked with and everything, which is my company, but basically, if people ask me where it was founded at, it was founded while I was at Glaxo. I had some friends that were in the entertainment field. I had friends that were associated, so I started working with them and helping them out and everything. And to be perfectly honest, at that time, the rules, because we're talking like I got out of journalism in terms of print media in the late 80s. So we're talking late 80s, early 90s. The rules in terms of like your access to certain things was a little bit looser than it is now. Technically speaking, I was probably, if the corporation had found out during that time, they would not have been all that thrilled. But, they were a little bit looser in terms of phone regulations and in terms of even access to the copy machine. So I was basically running and able to have access to some of those things that I probably would not have as much access to these days as I did then because they were a little looser in terms of their regulating those things.
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to, like you said, I was able to create my entrepreneurship while even in the workforce because I was able to use some of their resources.
Yep. Understood. Yeah, that's great.
And I think a lot of times folks don't understand that. But I'm just wondering, as you're talking to different folks, and I agree with it, we have to find ways to, if we're going to be in the corporate world, a lot of times I find people in the corporate world are also running other businesses. They might be doing multi-level marketing out of their home, or they might be doing this or that out of their home. I have a very dear friend who is back in corporate America, but she's also trying to do some stuff with her esthetician business and with some other fields that she's doing, I believe, with acting and modeling and things of that nature. So she is definitely trying to do those kind of careers so that she can go into what she really wants to do because the corporation she's working at, which I think has something to do with the medical field, is not what she wants to do as a life goal. Because I think sometimes we do have to understand that there are, in my mind, what I've always said is that there seems to be like almost two kinds of things that people are doing. They're doing their jobs and their careers. And if you're really blessed, your job and your career are the same thing. But a lot of times the job is what is paying the bills and the career is what we want to do. And I was just wondering if that's what you were saying.
The thing is that what I find is that a lot of times people, we have not really been trained in our community to really understand what viable business models are. And so what I find a lot of times by the time that people get to me, they're kind of burnt out from wandering in the desert and trying to find a path that is actually lucrative in their business, right? Because some business models work and others don't, period, right? And so, I've easily paid $50,000 to be in a room, right, with people that don't look like me, to understand business models that work and understand business models that are lucrative, right? And so you want to design and build a business model that's lucrative and that works. And so, but you're not going to get access to that information everywhere, right? So that's important. Is you have to, if you're going to do a 5 to 9, right? 9 to 5 and a 5 to 9, then make sure. I've done sort of like quick and dirty business assessments for people on how much money they're making, and they realize that their side hustle, like they're making $1 an hour, right? When all is said and done, and they look at how much effort and time they spend doing a particular thing, they when they break it down, it's like I've even had clients that have realized that they were paying their business $20 an hour, right, instead of making $20 an hour. So I help people kind of revolutionize that and shift that into very lucrative business models where you can make $1,000 an hour or $2,000 an hour, or right, and really change the paradigm and the way that people do business. I've helped people go from charging $150 an hour for coaching to closing $7,000 in 7 days. Because my stuff works fast. Like once you get the model and you get the psychology right, and you can raise the limit, the upper income. We often have an upper income ceiling in our consciousness that we're not even really aware of. It's just like I won't make more than $100,000, right? People have that as sort of an internal narrative. So I help blow that apart, right? And then people are free to make as much money as they're capable of making with viable business models.
Yeah, because one thing that I've been really amazed at, and I've even been guilty of it as well, but I have friends that have definitely been guilty of it, is that there's a lot of folks around here that have made a career in media and in entertainment. They might have done something in a theater, like a well-known local theater, like a theater that you would see shows at, like a 1,000-seat theater or something like that. Or they might have worked in TV stations or things of that nature. And they're oftentimes having people come to them and ask them for consulting. I've had people come and ask me for consulting. But then when you turn around and you ask and you say, that you're not just going to give them the advice free, that you need to have some sort of money, they look at you like you bumped your head on the wall. Because I think a lot of times people oftentimes think that they are supposed to give consulting or this kind of advice for free. And I do know that sometimes if you're talking to friends and acquaintances, you can sometimes get suckered into that whole kind of idea of, I'm going to do this as a favor, I'm going to do this as some way to help them, and that the reward will come later. But what I'm finding more and more is that if you do that, they'll take that advice, they'll run with that advice, and then they won't come back at you anymore for any more advice. So but I find that sometimes you just have to knuckle down and be like, look, I know that you know that I have this experience in this field, whether that's, like I've got a good friend that has worked in various kinds of productions, everything from multi-thousand-seat theaters to a couple of hundred-seat theaters. And, that's one of the advice that I give him and everything is that, rather than just giving this advice to people for free, if you're going to charge them, you got to charge them something that they can afford and it's reasonable, but also don't be giving it away for nothing.
Right. I think people underestimate the value of shaving years off of your journey, right? Like kind of advice that I give stops people from wandering in the desert for 5 years, right? That's what they've been doing all this time, not knowing what to do, right? And then all of a sudden they know what to do. So people have to value what it means to shave, years and hundreds of thousands of dollars off of their learning journey, right? So, it's just, and not all advice is qualified advice, but if you find qualified advice, be willing to pay for it because you think about what it costs you in the long run to keep doing it the way you've been doing it, right? It takes all this time, right? And I got a client who we did a case study with her. We called it Bind Your to Business in 30 Days. She'd been, spending 5 years writing down ideas on scraps of paper and putting them in a binder for 5 years, never having a viable business idea. 30 days later, she had a full-blown political consultancy and clocked $15,000 like 30 days later. So you can't underestimate right, what it is to have people that know what they're doing, that have walked the path to, shorten your journey by decades and by hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, and I think that oftentimes we do that. We do not take the advice that is out there, and we have to find ways to actually live up to those advice that people are giving us in terms of trying to make us successful and things of that nature. But sometimes we can be stubborn. So I was wondering, one of the things that I know that sometimes people run into is with business is trying to figure out how to balance both the creation of a business, like being a success in a business, and having success in the family. I know you have 2 adult kids. I know Dean, who is my partner, has a wife and children and grandchildren. So how do you balance that thing of being successful with family? Because I know a lot of times successful people, that's one of the things that they find the most difficult is balancing the business and the family life. Because I'm fortunate I don't have a wife as of yet, so I don't have that drama, but I do know that some people do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I did it as a single mom. I raised 2 kids. I got them $1.2 million worth of fancy private school education for $20,000, which was a bit of a coup. And all I can say is the way that I did it was I built teams, right? I built teams. So, when I needed to get my kids into college, Ivy League colleges, I built a team. We called it, Jordan Inc., where we raised money, and I had to bring in leverage. I had to build the virtual village around my kids, right? I had to, when I was traveling, I had to bring in help. I bartered with a nanny, right, so that I could get help to travel, support when I traveled. I just got really creative, and I couldn't do it by myself. So I built teams. I built infrastructures around to support the kids' efforts. And so, we don't usually think in those terms. We think, just rely on family and da-da-da-da. No, you can actually get really creative about how you outsource and how you insource and how you, I wouldn't allow myself to take on, tasks that I could pay somebody $10 an hour to do, right? If I can pay somebody to do it and I can go make $1,000 an hour, let me pay somebody to do it, right? So I did it through leverage. I did it really through leverage. That's the only way I would have gotten through that as a single mother. The other choice that I made was I picked the best schools that money could buy, and got my kids full rides into these schools. So, $25,000 a year K through 8, $25,000 a year high schools, full ride to Wellesley College for my daughter, which was, $260,000. But those schools provide extraordinary enrichment and extraordinary additional services and extraordinary child care and extraordinary after-school care. So a lot of that you would normally have to do yourself and be creative with and come out of pocket with was sort of baked into the curriculum that they had. So that solved me from having to do it. Now, what I did have to do was get them into those environments and keep them there. And a lot of us hear the sticker price of, $25,000 K through 8, and we go, well, I can't afford it. Instead of going, how can I afford it? How many ways can I afford it? How can I be creative about it? So I would not have known that I didn't know in advance that I could get my kids $1.2 million worth of education. I figured it out along the way, but I decided to do it first, right? So I did it sort of, through strategy, through team, through, a lot of leverage. I just had to get as much leverage as I could to get through it all.
And that actually raises two questions, and there's actually two separate questions that popped in my mind that I want to ask you about. One is with, we'll come back to Black Mastery. With Black Mastery and the fact that you have all these different thought leaders that you're involved with, I imagine that some of these thought leaders, we've had some guests that are coming in and out of the activist community, and some of the activist community is also very much, for lack of a better term, they're coming out of the left. They're coming out of like socialism and some of the other kinds of business models or political models that are out there. But your model is very much about putting capitalism out there and everything. So I was just wondering, how do you address involving these people that might have a wholly different economic model? Because I know that a lot of the activists are coming out of a more, as you just put it, burn the system kind of down model and not so much building the system back up, or they want to build it up as a restructuring or whatever. So I imagine that some of these people that you're talking to are not necessarily what people would consider staunch capitalists, that are the activists and the thought leaders.
Well, I mean, the revolution must be monetized, and, whether this thing burns to the ground, the economy, tanks and burns to the ground with people that are anticipating a crash is coming. In the meantime, people still have to eat, right? Babies eat 3 times a day. And, my daddy was a Panther, and I saw what not having money did to the movement, right? So to believe that you can have a movement that's not funded and monetized is an exercise in futility. Like you have to have resources to activate a movement. So what you find when you don't have that is that you find activists get very burnt out. They feel unsupported. They end up feeling resentful. They end up feeling all these things, right, because the revolution isn't monetized. So it's naive to think that in the meanwhile, right, while we still have capitalism in the economy, that we don't have to use money to lubricate the levers of political movements. It's just what's required.
Yeah, and I can definitely see that.